Thank you guys so much. Oh, come on. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is fantastic. Hey, the Ron Paul revolution is stronger than it's ever been, man. How cool is that, huh? And thank you to all of our great speakers tonight. Of course, Clint Russell, the poorest-looking millionaire in the world, who's up here. The great Scott Horton, everybody. Who, of course, I appreciate. Scott gave a speech that was only 1/76th as long as his typical speech that he gives. So he cut it down for us. And, of course, one more time for Eric July. That was incredible. He really fits that stereotype, you know? He's just your typical black metal frontman, libertarian comic nerd. You know what I mean? Just a dime a dozen, those guys. But I appreciate everything everybody said, and I really loved Eric's message of the idea that we will win. And I got to tell you guys, man, I am so optimistic about what we're doing here. I am so excited for the future of the Libertarian Party. I think we have an incredible moment that we're going to be a part of right now, and particularly because of what the Mises Caucus is doing. You know, I know Michael Heiss started this thing in 2017. I joined in 2018. I believe Scott joined in 2019, I think the next year. It's only 2022. I mean, I remember just a few years ago when I would get in debates with people who were critics of the Mises Caucus, and they would laugh at us, and they used to say, you're going to lose all of the internal elections in the LP. You guys will never get control of this party. You'll never be in the driver's seat. Well, let me tell you, those people ain't saying that anymore. Yeah. The mic is, here, hold on, let me see. Maybe it's better if I hold it like that? Yeah? Okay. We'll see. Maybe not. This is my first time with a microphone, so. But I will tell you, I am so excited about what the Libertarian Party can do in the very short future. And I think we have an incredible opportunity. And this opportunity is not so much because of our rich tradition of ideas and the legacy of this party, although we really do have both of those things. And I think that every day we should remember that. Every day that you're a member of this party, remember that this is the party of Ron Paul. This is the party of Harry Browne. We are the inheritors of that tradition, and it makes me proud to be a member of the Libertarian Party. But that is not why we have an incredible opportunity. The reason why we have such an incredible opportunity to really do something amazing here is for one simple reason, and it has nothing to do with anything that we've done. It is because every major institution in this country has been completely discredited. That's the truth. Their trust has evaporated. Nobody respects the political class or the corporate media. Nobody respects Hollywood, and this is reflected all around you, whether it's the dwindling numbers of people who watch stupid things like the Oscars, unless, of course, Will Smith smacks the shit out of Chris Rock, and then we're like, all right, I'll check out the clip. But no one actually tunes into these things anymore. Nobody trusts CNN anymore, and nobody believes any of the political class in Washington, D.C. This is demonstrably true. And why is this? Why is it that the trust in all of the major institutions in America has completely disappeared? Well, it's for one very obvious reason, and that is that the 21st century has been an unmitigated disaster. And the people in the corporate press and the political class have been wrong about everything. And you know, the old saying, you can fool some of the people some of the time. But, you know, even Americans, as dumb as rocks as we can be sometimes, 22 years into the 21st century know that this whole thing is falling apart. You know, I was born in '83. I'm also, like Clint, a child of the 90s, the late 80s and the 90s. And, I mean, the 90s weren't perfect. And I know people say it was the generation of peace and prosperity, but if you check out Scott's next 5-hour lecture, he will explain that it was not actually so peaceful. Like, not if you were in Kosovo or Iraq. But, you know, But man, the 90s do look pretty good compared to the 21st century. I know there's young people at every Mises Caucus event, and there's always young people, but let's just think about this for a second. What have the American people been handed by the ruling elite in the 21st century, which is now 22 years old? Well, we got 9/11, we got the war, the terror wars, we got the worst financial crash and worst economic recession since the Great Depression, we got the phony Obama recovery, we got the rise of woke insanity, which all led to what? The Donald Trump presidency. And by the last year of the Donald Trump presidency, we got 2020, the worst year for regular people in modern American history. And now we got Joe Biden. Could anyone look at that and spin that into like, things are going pretty good so far, I think. And the whole time, the corporate press has been wrong about everything. So just to go through this a little bit, okay? And I know when there are young people here, sometimes I have to start from this part in the story, and sometimes you guys don't even believe me. But for the people who are my age or older, back me up on this. This is true, okay? In the year 2000, George W. Bush becomes president. He won it fair and square when a bunch of Jews voted for Pat Buchanan. And now George W. Bush, believe it or not, I swear to God this is true, George W. Bush campaigned on a humble foreign policy. I know, there's always a few young people who go, I don't think that's right, but I'm telling you, this is right. This did actually happen. I was there, and I saw it. He campaigned on a humble foreign policy. He said that the military should never be used for nation building. It should only be used to defend the United States of America. And he railed against the big government policies of Bill Clinton and that he was going to bring fiscal sanity to Washington, D.C., to balance the budget and rein in all of this excess of government, and also to like bring back morality or something like that. No more blowjobs or whatever. I don't remember exactly, but so this is how the George W. Bush administration started. And in the year 2000, George W. Bush had a real problem on his hands. And the problem was that a bubble was bursting. And it was the dot-com bubble from the 90s. Because actually, Clinton's prosperity was kind of artificial, and the bill was coming due. And if George W. Bush had, some integrity or some intelligence, or had maybe once ever read a book, perhaps he would have been able to say, well, look, this is because of the bad policies in the 90s, and we have to feel this pain now, and something like that. But he didn't. And instead, what they did was Alan Greenspan, the then Fed chairman, brought interest rates way down low to avoid any of the pain of the dot-com bubble. They brought interest rates all the way down to 2%. Now, I know to some of you young people, that sounds like those are crazy high interest rates. But at the time, this was very crazy to bring the Fed fund rate down to 2%. Just to keep in mind, in 1980, to rein in the inflation of the 70s, the Fed fund rate hit 20%. Okay? Yeah, try raising the Fed fund rate to 20% today, and you would just hear the sound of shotguns blasting in the street. But this was what happened in America. Anyway, so the Fed fund rate comes down to 2%. But we're just keeping it there temporarily so we don't feel the pain of the dot-com bubble. And then in 2001, of course, there was 9/11, where a bunch of crazy Muslims hijacked these planes and flew them into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and we had never done nothing to them to provoke it. So for no reason, I don't care what Scott will tell you, they hated us for our freedom. The story goes that one day, Osama bin Laden was walking through the desert, and he stumbled on a copy of the Bill of Rights. And it just got him so mad that he was like, any of you guys want to blow, killing these people with all these freedom? And all his friends were like, absolutely. And so so 9/11, again, completely unprovoked. And then there was no raising interest rates. In fact, we brought them even lower. because now we had to fight a war on terror, and now we were going to need to raise spending, because obviously whenever there's a crisis in Washington, D.C., the answer is to raise spending. So no one feels any pain immediately. And this was fine. Worked out great. No problems. And then George W. Bush launched the war on terrorism. And as Scott will explain to you much better than I can, they could have trapped Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora toward the end of 2001, but they let him escape. And instead they decided to fight a regime change war against the Taliban. And then in 2003, they decided to fight a regime change war against Saddam Hussein. And both of these wars worked out great. Okay, they didn't so much. They went bad. But at least the interest rates were low, right? So we didn't have to feel any of the economic pain. I mean, there was no war tax. There was nothing that they were making the American people, except for the ones whose kids were bribed and propagandized to go fight these wars. No one else had to pay anything for it. So it seemed like, you know, to most American people, this was kind of okay. And we're winning. And they kept telling us we were winning. Every month, every year, every quarter, they told the American people it's going great. Dick Cheney said the insurgency is in its final throes. And every time they said that army we're building up in Afghanistan is doing fantastic, and we're beating the Taliban back, and the war on terrorism is being won. That's what they kept telling the American people. And the whole time, interest rates stayed low. But this did have some other effects. You know, when interest rates are low, a lot of people buy houses who wouldn't otherwise have bought those houses. Maybe even an adjustable rate mortgage. But who cares? Because housing prices are going up by 10%, 12% every year. So you'll make that money back, until eventually interest rates had to go up. And this destroyed the entire economy. According to the Federal Reserve, between 2007 and 2010, the average net worth of the American people declined by 40%. 40% of the average working class person's net worth evaporated in those few short years. You know, if you want to look around and wonder, why is this whole country spinning out of control? Why is everybody at each other's throats? Why are we so, like, it wasn't always like this. Why did it happen? Look no further than those years right there. That's the start of all of it. And of course, the country was completely fed up. By 2008, the Americans were completely over it. George W. Bush, who once, after 9/11, enjoyed the highest approval ratings of any president in American history, his approval ratings were in the garbage. Because what had he given us? 2 disastrous wars, the worst economy in nearly 100 years, not to mention other blunders like Katrina and just being an idiot. And the American people were so fed up that they would elect the most anti-George W. Bush candidate that was available to them. And who was that? Barack Hussein Obama, the constitutional lawyer, who promised to return, you know, the most progressive member of the Senate, as they used to call him, right? He promised to return the country to normalcy. He was going to restore the rule of law. He was going to close Guantanamo Bay and end the wars in Iraq, end the war in Afghanistan. This is what Obama ran on, and the American people said, okay, we'll go with this guy. And man, does he give a hell of a speech. And this is great, because also, on top, he's not retarded. And, you know, we're pretty over having this retarded president, so we'll go with this guy. And so the country got all behind him. You know, Obama, when he first got in, double-check me on this, I don't remember the exact approval ratings, but his approval ratings after he first won were up above 70%. Now, try to imagine a president today having a 70% plus approval rating. You know, as much as they might say the country, you know, is so racist or horrible or any of that, the truth is that the vast majority of Americans, after Obama got elected in 2008, were rooting for him. They wanted him to succeed. They wanted the country to be fixed. And so Obama led what they called the Obama recovery. So that 40% of wealth that was just stolen from the American people, don't worry about that because we had the Obama recovery. But of course, what was the Obama recovery? What was the answer? Well, you remember those 2% interest rates? We're bringing them down to 0. 0% interest rates for the first time in American history. And they held him there for, I think, 6, 7 years, where money was free. Of course, that also has some unintended consequences. That might sound nice, right? You can get money for absolutely free. But while the American people are broke and extending loans is a risky business, how likely is a bank to extend a loan to a working class person when they collect no interest on it? Not very. But who do they extend it to? Big banks, big corporations, the people who are the least likely to default on the money, right? So all of this just fueled Wall Street speculation. It fueled the rich and powerful getting more money, buying up more of the economy. But also Obama jacked up government spending to the highest, at the time, the highest levels it had ever been. And so that was the Obama recovery. It was artificially low interest rates and record high government spending. Record low interest rates, record high spending. And so what was the result of all of this? Well, all of the people on CNN and MSNBC were telling you, oh, the economy's recovering. Look at these graphs. Look at the stock market. Look at the unemployment numbers. What happened? Go look at a map of the richest counties in America. Where are they? Right outside of Washington, D.C., and then the others right outside New York City. That's it. It's the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and the suburbs of New York City. Now, that ain't capitalism. It's not like there are these big factories in Washington, D.C. producing all of our goods, and that's why all these people are making this money. What is it? It's the politically connected, those connected to the military-industrial complex. They're all in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And what are the suburbs of New York City? It's all stockbrokers. It's all the people who are gambling the American people's retirement funds in the Wall Street casino. So that is what set the table for Donald Trump. Not racism, not a rise in white nationalism. It was just there were hundreds of counties that voted for Barack Obama that then flipped and voted for Donald Trump because they wanted the same thing that Obama promised them, that Trump promised them. It was that simple. Look, if you remove Donald Trump's dumbass comments and his stupid tweets and all of that, what was the core center of his promise? It was make America great again. What is that? He's saying the 21st century has sucked. We used to be great. We're not anymore. I'm going to make it great again, and I'm going to bring your jobs back. This is what won over former Obama voters, not some rise in Nazism. And so people went with Donald Trump. Now, one of the other facts, before I get into the Trump years, is that as Obama started failing on every one of his promises, the establishment got really spooked. And they got spooked by two things that happened in Obama's first term. There were two populist uprisings, one on the left and one on the right, that really spooked the establishment. One was the Tea Party, and the other was the Occupy movement. And they did not like those. If you want to get the attention of the ruling elite, stand outside big banks and yell, "We are the 99%. That makes them wake up a little bit to like, that could be a problem. And of course, that around the same time, the Tea Party was screaming about banker bailouts and deficits and taxes and the whole system being corrupt. So, right after that, coincidentally, all of a sudden, wokeism took hold. Now, critical race theory always existed. Critical theory was in the universities, but it was not in mainstream America the way it is today. And you can actually look at this if you look at like Nexus charts, where you can just map out the words that are used in major news publications. Like if you just look at the word racism and how many times it appears in the New York Times and the Washington Post, right around 2010, 2011, if you look at the chart, it's like, like just skyrockets. Like it was all racism, because all of a sudden racism was so much worse than it was in the 60s in the year 2010, you know? In terms of like white supremacy and white privilege and gender identity, go look at any of those terms in a Nexus chart. All of a sudden, the big corporations, Hollywood, they all started flooding the conversation with this stuff. And this is to throw people off of the scent, to get everyone fighting each other, instead of having an Occupy movement fighting against the big banks and a Tea Party movement fighting against big government. They'd rather have the people fighting each other over transgender bathrooms or something like that. So in comes Donald Trump, skip ahead to 2016. And Donald Trump is like, screw all this woke stuff, Screw political correctness. This is about bringing your jobs back, making America great again. We're not fighting any of these stupid wars. And he was the biggest middle finger that the American people could give to the entire ruling elite who had ruined the 21st century. And don't get me wrong, a lot of Americans hated Donald Trump, but tens of millions were on board and voted for him. And what was the problem with Donald Trump? As Scott Horton likes to say, the country needed Ron Paul. But they got Donald Trump, who unfortunately, the problem with Donald Trump isn't what the left claims. It's not that he was like a Nazi or that, he wasn't literally Hitler. He was just a bloviating, ignoramus narcissist who's never, forget George W. Bush never read a book. He's never read an article about anything that he's talking about. He just all goes on gut, It's going to be terrific, trust me. It's just all that. But so think about this, right? The culmination of the first 16 years of the 21st century was the American people giving the biggest middle finger they could to the establishment. And in Donald Trump's last year, 2020, Americans are locked in their homes. 700,000 small businesses closed their doors permanently. Tens of millions of Americans kicked out of work on government assistance. Millions of children completely had their lives disrupted, some maybe never to recover. The biggest disaster in modern American history. That's what the American people got after they voted for the repudiation of the establishment. And of course, they got none of it. All of the terrible policies continued under Trump. And so this opened the door for the establishment to make a comeback. And they got this bright young kid to lead the charge. Joseph Biden. Joe Biden, the corporate press weekend at Bernied him over the finish line. They literally told the guy, stay in his basement while we just make the entire election about Trump. Trump wasn't even running against anyone. It was just Trump. And where's his opponent? And they were like, don't worry about that. Just like, do you like this guy? No, it's been a pretty bad year. Okay, then vote for whoever the other guy is. And now Joe Biden, who, by the way, was never that bright, but has clearly lost a step. He is the establishment's great comeback. So we're back to the establishment having control. And how's that going? Yeah. Where are Joe Biden's approval ratings right now? In the gutter. Only compared to Kamala Harris's approval ratings. Can anyone make Joe Biden's approval ratings look good? And so that's what we've got now. However, there's also a huge opportunity that's come here, which is that the American people are disillusioned with the entire system. And at the same time, as someone who was a child of the Ron Paul revolution, what was our biggest problem with Ron Paul? What was the biggest obstacle we faced? Well, the biggest obstacle we faced was that there was a complete blackout on Ron Paul. The corporate press wouldn't give him any attention. I mean, he would get 3 minutes in a debate, and he would kick ass in those 3 minutes, and he'd light up the internet, But that's all we could get. And then, the old thing Jon Stewart made that great whole compilation about, where they'd be like, Mitt Romney takes first place and knocks Michelle Bachmann down to third place. And he's like, behind who? And they're like, don't worry about second. But now, us libertarians, we don't really need the corporate press anymore. We don't. We can go on shows like the Joe Rogan Experience, which I've been on not 6, but 7 times, just to be clear. But we can go on a show that has 20 times as big an audience as the CNN show that day and speak for 3 hours interrupted. We don't need to squeeze our points in between commercial breaks. And I'll still talk to a lot of people, and great people, you guys, who I love in the Libertarian Party, who will be like, man, if you run, we just need to get you in the presidential debates. And let me tell you, that is the wrong mindset to have. We don't need to beg to get into the presidential debates. I have a dream, to quote another great thinker. My vision for the Libertarian Party is that we get to a point where we are making so much noise, there is so much interest in what we're talking about, that they ask us to come to the, like, oh my God, your ratings will be so insane. Will you please come be a part of the presidential debates? And we tell them we will see if we can make it. That's... I can't promise you I'll hold the date. That's what our attitude should be. We don't need any of that. We have our own opportunities right now. We can reach more people, and more people who are really open to what we have to say. Because if you haven't noticed, across the political spectrum right now, there is this huge revolt against the establishment. And contrary to what a lot of people think, it's not just on the right. It's obviously on the right wing, where people are really questioning, I mean, not even questioning, rejecting the neoconservative foreign policy, and really rejecting so much of the cultural, the cultural established order that's been given to them over the last, particularly 10 years, but really the last several decades. But it's also happening on the left. The problem is, as soon as they wake up, they get called the right wing too. Now, I was arguing with someone the other day about this. You got to admit that the right wing has gotten a lot better over the last 10 years, and the left wing has gotten way crazier. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by the left wing? I mean, how about Joe Rogan and Tim Pool and Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Mattei, and just rattle all these people off, and they go, well, those are all kind of right-wingers now. And we're like, yeah, well, if you define everyone getting better as right-winger, then yes, right-wingers are the only ones getting better. But the truth is that there's a lot of people who have woken up to this insanity. And of course, they're looking for everyone. They're looking for any type of leader they can. All of these alternative platforms are blowing up because at least they're criticizing the establishment. But what is it that the American people keep looking for that they can't find? It's us. It's liberty. The actual answers to what caused all of these problems. And that's our job, to step into that void and explain it to people. That actually libertarians were the ones who were telling you from the very beginning about the rise of the empire and the military-industrial complex, the rise of the spying apparatus and the national security state. We were the ones talking about devaluing the currency and government authoritarianism and the police state, which, by the way, the entire COVID regime would have been nothing more than if, maniacs dictating their orders into the thin air if it wasn't for the police state to enforce it. That's what all of this comes down to, that libertarians, the real libertarians, the serious tradition of ideas that we inherit, we had the answers to all of this. And now is the best time in my lifetime by far to actually explain this to the American people. And so we have this tremendous opportunity where we have the best opportunity to reach a lot of people, and they're the most captive of an audience that we could hope for. And at the same time, we have to understand what we're up against. And this really is no joke. Of course, as Scott and Clint both mentioned, I mean, this is really, I don't think we're going to go to nuclear war, but the threat of nuclear war is greater than it's ever been. This is no joke. And this whole COVID stuff over the last couple years, although it is winding down a little bit, the ones holding on to it really seem to be like I was talking to Jake Shields, who's a UFC fighter and a very libertarian-minded person, and he was talking about how in San Francisco they still have the vaccine passport. Like, you can't go to a restaurant unless you have proof of vaccination. And even New York and LA have given up on this. But San Francisco, it kind of reminds you of like Cuba hanging on to communism. Like, they're like, no, we're still doing it. And you're like, everyone's given up on this. But look, aside from just the absurdity of it, think about what just happened in Canada just 2 months ago, where you had a real liberty movement, a populist, working-class liberty movement, right? The trucker protests and all that, they were asking for nothing other than liberty. Their demands were very specific. What were their demands? End the mandates. That's it. There was no mincing words about what they really wanted. It wasn't like one of these movements where, it wasn't like the Black Lives Matter protests where it's like, well, we want an end to police brutality, but we also want an end to racism, and we also want equity, and we also want this. And it was very clear. End the mandates. That's it. That's all they wanted. And what was the response from the Canadian government? Urged by Joe Biden. It was to invoke unprecedented emergency powers to squash this movement, seize bank accounts with no due process. Now, this isn't, some third world country 4,000 miles away. This is Canada. So my point is this, right? This is the opportunity we have, and this is what we're up against. So what would you do if you had the greatest opportunity ever and you were up against the greatest threat ever? I'd say you'd fight like hell to make sure you take advantage of that opportunity. That's our job, all right? By the way, this is water. I know it really doesn't look like it, but I'm drinking liquid death water. So if we have the best opportunity we've ever had, and we're up against the greatest threat we've ever been up against, well then what is the role of libertarians here? And I would submit that what we need to focus on, particularly after Reno, when the Mises Caucus has an incredible day, as we're going to, or an incredible weekend, the mission immediately after that is to unite as many libertarians as we can behind this cause. No more infighting, no more sectarianism, no more tribalism. We all come together after Reno, and we are one group of liberty-minded people, just like in the Ron Paul Revolution, fighting against government authoritarianism. That's our next step, and I need everybody here to be involved in that. We love all libertarians, okay? Now, I want to say about kind of the infighting that's been going on with a lot of this stuff, right? And believe me, I completely agree with what Eric was saying before. I'm not like disagreeing with that. The people out there who call you all of the worst names in the book, who go around calling people Nazis and rapists and racists and all this, screw those people, but let's get real. There's like 12 of them. It's really not that important. If it wasn't for social media, we'd never know they existed. Okay, so forget those, but there are a lot of other people out there who are really good libertarians, who just maybe don't see things exactly the way we do, and it's our job to persuade them that we're really in this for the right reasons. So to kind of connect this to what Eric was talking about with a lot of these cultural issues, here's the thing. There are people out there who just call the Mises Caucus names that are being disingenuous, that are bad faith actors. We all know that that exists. But there are also other people out there who I think are actually good people who just don't get it. And what they don't understand is that what the Mises Caucus, I believe in large parts, like a large portion of the membership of this caucus, basically believes this, that we absolutely cannot couple libertarian principles with insane woke ideology. That is a disaster if we do that. There is no reason why the philosophy of peace and prosperity and civilization and private property rights and the non-aggression principle also needs to go, also has to be coupled to, and you should be really happy if your son wants to be your daughter. Feel however you feel about that last one, it has nothing to do with the first. And the idea of insisting that these things all must be joined together will kill our chance of having the mass movement that we can in this country. There is no reason for us to insist that you have to adopt the cultural norms of the progressive norms of the last decade, which were literally created to distract the American people over nonsense. There's no reason why we have to embrace those. You can reject all of that insanity, because that's exactly what it is. You can reject that and still believe in liberty and peace and tolerance and also respect for your fellow people. It does not mean you have to hate trans people if you don't think that 5-year-olds should be taught about gender fluidity. That is a false binary that is put on us by the establishment. I don't hate any group of people, but I do mock the woke orthodoxies. And I think that's how most of us feel. Now, I think there's a genuine confusion on the part of some groups of libertarians who think, and this is on us, Mises Caucus people, this is on us to make sure that they understand this. Because often, I think the Mises Caucus guys, particularly on social media, where, look, nobody's perfect. You know, sometimes I see, I won't say this in front of any other group, but you people, but sometimes I see Mises Caucus groups tweeting stuff, and I'm like, pull it back. But not pointing any fingers. Pretty sure we all know who I'm talking about. Anyway, but a lot of times the Mises Caucus guys will be mocking wokeism, and I think there are some decent libertarians in the middle who take that as, oh, so you're racist. So if you mock someone for saying, you know, we hate bigotry, and you're like, wow, so brave. And then they go, oh, so you love bigotry? But that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that right now we're involved in a moment where there is a hysteria about calling everyone who wins an argument with a progressive racist. And we reject that. That doesn't mean we embrace racism. And one more time, as I say with all these speeches in front of the Mises Caucus, and I know I speak for all of you guys, and please, let me know. Be the first to let me know if I don't. We reject racism. We reject bigotry. We reject all forms of collectivism because we are individualist libertarians, period. That's what the Mises Caucus stands for. And I think we demonstrate that all of the time. But the thing is this, right? If you have the biggest opportunity that you've ever had, and you're facing the biggest threat that you've ever faced, and the establishment has inserted this woke ideology to distract people during this time, what should we say? Maybe we shouldn't sound exactly like CNN and embrace all of their woke ideology. Maybe we should sound radically different and actually stand up for what we believe in. That's the point. There's a whole camp in the Libertarian Party who seems to have this view. And this is, I think, what a lot of Mises Caucus people are talking about when they talk about the like red pill, blue pill distinction, which I know a lot of people don't like that terminology. I think it's somewhat useful, but I understand if you don't like it. But here's basically the divide. There's a whole bunch of good libertarians. Forget the people who are dishonest actors. We can forget them for a second. There's a bunch of good libertarians who basically have this attitude. Like, look, if the entire press calls you a bunch of bigot, racist, Nazi transphobes, then the American people are going to think we're a bunch of bigot, racist, Nazi transphobes. And you can kind of see where they're coming from. Like, you can understand why they would feel that way. But here's how I look at it. If we are ever to achieve any success, if we're ever to be a threat to the system at all, it is a guarantee that the corporate press will call us bigot, racist, Nazi, transphobes. So that's it. We can either accept that that's going to happen, or we can give up now. And I know that all of you, even the libertarians who are like, well, we have to make sure they don't ever call us that. If you ever achieve any success, guess what? They're going to call you that. And you'll be like, wait, me? But I'm not. It doesn't matter that you're not. That's the game. So it's on you to either decide right now, either we can tell the truth and accept all of the arrows that are going to come our way and laugh it off, because who cares? And luckily for us, all of these terms have completely lost their value. No one believes it anymore. You know, when they were going after Joe Rogan, let me rephrase that. When they were going after my close friend, Joe Rogan, recently, but they were going after him for being a racist, and the whole thing was that instead of saying the N-word, he uttered the word. That was like the whole controversy. No one believes Joe Rogan's a racist. No one. No one who knows him thinks that. No one who listens to him thinks that. None of the people going after him think that. None of the people who see the people going after him think that they think that. The whole thing is like a game. No one believes these terms anymore. Here's how ridiculous the whole thing is. Someone the other day on Twitter called me, and I swear to God, this is what they called me. They called me a racist Nazi. Now, when you have to preface Nazi with racist, you don't believe what you're saying. If someone is a Nazi, we have passed racist long ago. That should just be assumed. Like, you're a genocidal maniac jerk. You know, this is all a performative game. And so what we need to do right now in this moment is kind of accept that it's a new paradigm that we're entering, where people are waking up to this thing. People need real answers. We have those real answers. The names that they're going to call you, it's much easier to laugh off. It's not like being called a racist in the 90s, where that kind of meant something. Now you can kind of laugh that off and you can just tell the truth. And the truth is that we are the Mises Caucus. We are the continuation of the Ron Paul revolution. What we stand for is not any of the social distractions. What we stand for is talking about the issues that are plaguing the American people, that are destroying this country, namely the empire, the military-industrial complex, the COVID regime, the destruction of our currency, the militarization of the police, the mass incarceration state, the bureaucratic cartelization of the economy, and the corporate welfare. That's what we're focused on. And if we focus on those issues, we really can, after Reno, unite libertarians around a common cause. That's how Ron Paul did it, is that it was about the issues that he stood for. And they were so important, and he was so good on all those issues, that it brought everybody together. So I think that's the blueprint going forward, to be all about being right on the most important issues, and that's what libertarians can unite around. And I got to tell you guys, I am so excited for Reno next month. I am so excited for what the Libertarian Party is going to look like after this. And for us to do this, the most important thing right now is to elect Angela McArdle as the next LNC chair. That's the entire mission right now. That's really the most important thing to keep this all going. Angela, if you don't know her personally, she's incredible. She is brilliant. She is incredibly organized. She has the energy of the gods. So I don't know if you guys have ever worked with Angela McArdle before, but she's like got notes about everything. Like, I'm like, you know, like, meet me in the hotel lobby for breakfast, and she's like got like the breakfast items listed out on her sheet. She is going to be a force once she's the chair of the LNC, and I can't wait for that. And the most important thing right now is for us to get as many delegates to Reno as possible. So please, if you're not already a delegate, go talk to one of the organizers at the end of this. That's the most important thing. We can still sign up more delegates right now. Make sure, talk to one of these guys and find out whether or not you can be eligible, because a lot more people can be, I believe we can present them tomorrow as delegates. That's the most important part of this mission. And this is going to be, by the way, while we're on this mission that is so important and so meaningful, we're also just going to have a ton of fun. We're going to have beers with each other and laugh with each other and meet lots of other great people. And if nothing else, we're going to all go down together. You know, I got a little girl and a little boy. And that's really what motivates me to be a part of this more than anything else. The example I want to set for my kids. What we're up against is daunting. This is quite a challenge. But I'll be damned if my little girl and my little boy don't grow up knowing that I fought for what I believed in and gave it everything I had. I say this everywhere I go, and I know I get people who come up and thank me for what I do because I host a silly podcast. But I, from the bottom of my heart, thank all of you guys for being here today. I'm inspired by what you guys do. I know you guys do hard work. I know that it's not always fun and rewarding. I know that it's sometimes a little monotonous to go vote on a resolution to amend the amendment to the previous resolution, or whatever the hell is going to happen tomorrow. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for being a part of this. I really believe that we are about to be a part of something great and meaningful and amazing. So thank you guys so much for coming out today. Long live the Mises Caucus.